Hello everybody, welcome back to a video, and today I'm going to update my Ghostface rankings. Now, for this list, I will be including the Ghostface trio and also Jason from the beginning of Scream 6. So, without further ado, let's get into this. So number 13 is Mrs. Loomis. Yeah, last place is still the same. And I actually think Scream 6 made it to where Mrs. Loomis is actually a weaker Ghostface. Now, I actually did just rewatch this movie the other day, and Mrs. Loomis still was the weakest Ghostface in my opinion. But, yeah, I mean, she gets Randy. That's about it. I like a good vengeance story, but I actually think that Scream told a better vengeance story recently. So that being said, let's move on to number 12. Number 12, Charlie Walker. He definitely gets points for being the most gruesome Ghostface. But ultimately, I don't know. It feels like all the writing effort went into the other killer, Jill. So you don't really get a lot of writing for Charlie, and so ultimately he winds up being the weakest of the secondary killers. So, with that being said, let's move on to number 11. Number 11 is Jason Carvey from Scream 6. Now, some people would probably say he doesn't count. But he did commit a killing as Ghostface. So I am going to include him, but I'm not going to include his never seen partner. Essentially, the opening is about a Ghostface killer, which is a great idea. I mean, this is New York in the movie. I mean, the tagline on the poster is New York, new rules. Why can't you have a Ghostface be the opening kill? So I really like that idea, and it's actually a pretty interesting sequence. So, I mean, there's really nothing else I can say apart from cool idea to have a Ghostface be the opening kill. But, yeah. Alright, let's just get into the top 10. Number 10 is Amber from Scream 2022. Oh, boy. It still really stinks that it's this Ghostface that kills my favorite character in the series. Really? Why? Why is it Amber? She is actually a pretty efficient Ghostface at other sequences. And she is interesting to watch. And she gets the best death of any Ghostface. Because, I mean, you kind of have to make it to where it feels like, she's paying for the fact that she ended the best character in the series. But it's also that fact that makes me really hate her as a character. So, I don't know. I like how her motive for wanting to make a new Stab movie is actually connected to the fact that she got into those movies because her house is Stu's house. That's actually a cool idea and a cool perspective. But ultimately, she is the weaker of the two killers. Now, in my other video, I actually had it the other way around, I believe, where I think I had Richie lower than Amber. Well, obviously, Scream 6 has swapped those two around for me. So, let's get on to the next placement. Number 9, the only Ghostface to do it by himself, Roman Bridger. Yes, the idea of a solo Ghostface is really cool. And he is the Ghostface for the most underrated movie in the series, Scream 3. But it's just there's something about him which is kind of, I don't know. I like his fight scene against Sydney. And I don't mind the whole sibling twist. But ultimately, I just think there are better characters that were revealed to be Ghostface. Also, was it just me, or did they make Kincaid really suspicious? I mean, seriously. After I saw the movie, I said Kincaid is the most suspicious red herring the series has ever given. But yeah, my other issue with Roman is the fact that ultimately he doesn't share any screen time with Sydney before the reveal. I mean, a simple, they bump into each other kind of thing would have been okay. But ultimately, Sydney's just left having her head scratched because, I mean, she's never met this guy before. So let's move on to number 8. Number 8 is Ethan Bailey, or Kirsch, from Scream 6. Now, this is the weakest of the Ghostface trio. Probably didn't get any actual kills under his belt. It's kind of debatable, but I mean, you could definitely say that from the opening to the bodega, you could say that that's Bailey. And Quinn obviously says when she is Ghostface. So, I mean, basically the main thing Ethan does is send Chad to the hospital and be there so Tara can have a Ghostface to fight briefly. Now, I do like the idea of there being 3 killers. That is something that was my main want for Scream 6. Did I think he was going to be one of them? No. But I do think that he is the weakest of the 3. He also doesn't even go by his real name until the end of the movie. So, but yeah, let's just move on to number 7. Number 7, ironically, is Ethan's brother, Richie. Yeah, my opinions on Richie grew with Scream 6 because it was just kind of like, okay, he's obsessed with these movies. He really likes them. And then you see the level of obsessed that he was in Scream 6, and you're thinking, oh, okay then. But in terms of reveals, he probably was one of the best when it came to acting not very suspicious. It definitely, you wouldn't suspect this guy to be Ghostface. I think genuinely, when it comes to the acting of the character pretending not to be Ghostface, probably is the runner-up. He does have one slip-up where he kind of gives himself away if the audience is paying close attention with their ears. That's after he meets Dewey. He says he's way more fun in the movies. At that point, he only claimed to have been watching the first stab. So there are aspects to Richie which are really good, but ultimately there are some that kind of hold him back a little bit. So that's really all I have to say. Now here comes the most controversial pick at number 6. Yeah, number 6 is Billy Loomis. So, I watched Scream again recently, and my opinions of Billy dropped even more. Um, Definitely a great reveal, right? You know, he grabs the gun from Sydney, lets Randy in. Randy says, you gotta help me, Stu's gone mad. And then Billy says, we all go a little mad sometimes. Not like that, but that wasn't a good Skeet Ulrich impression, but regardless. Um, yeah, it's a great reveal, but ultimately, reveal onwards is why he's here. But I don't think he'd be remembered that well as a character if he wasn't Ghostface. There are some characters on this list that I think would be forgotten if they were not Ghostface, and I think Billy would probably be one of them. Not the best character in the world, and definitely the weaker of the two Ghostfaces from Scream 1. So let's move into the top 5. Number 5, Mickey Altieri from Scream 2. This guy is a blast to watch on screen. His motive would have never worked, but, right, when you think about it, the O.J. Simpson trial would have happened recently at the time of this movie, and that was the biggest TV event of the year, I believe. And so, when you think about it, that actually could be why he thought he'd have a bigger exposure than the Super Bowl. And also, he is a really good Ghostface and probably the one responsible for the car sequence of Scream 2, which is one of that movie's better sequences. But I think Mickey is actually underrated in terms of his intelligence, where when you think about it, this guy's actually pretty smart. He plants seeds in Sydney's head for her to distrust Derek the whole movie. And then when his reveal comes, he uses those seeds he planted in her mind, those seeds of doubt, to ultimately use them to kill Derek. The only thing that's holding him back is the fact that Mrs. Loomis kind of stole the show from him. Although, probably has the best comes back for one last scare. But, yeah. Let's get into the top 4. Number 4 is Detective Bailey from Scream 6. Now, I like the different approach that they take with Detective Bailey compared to Mrs. Loomis. Because Mrs. Loomis believes she's completely innocent, hands clean of how Billy turned out. Whereas Detective Bailey genuinely realizes he had a small role in his son ultimately going down the path that he did, because Bailey is Richie's father. And so his scheme is also different from Mrs. Loomis's in the sense that it's actually very similar to that episode of Sherlock, The Reichenbach Fall. Where in that episode of Sherlock, Moriarty is destroying Sherlock's name, whereas in this movie, Bailey is trying to destroy Sam's name. It's actually very similar and a really good plot point that differentiates Scream 6 from Scream 2. Which is, Mrs. Loomis would have had Sydney still ultimately be the hero, whereas Bailey would have had Sam be the villain. It's a very good twist on on that, and ultimately makes for a really interesting reveal. And he is, I would say, the Ghostface from the second Carvey picks up the phone, definitely through the bodega sequence. That's him as Ghostface. And maybe the psychiatrist as well. In fact, I'm actually kind of tempted to give him credit for most of the Ghostface sequences. I mean, with the exception of Mindy and Gail's attack, it actually would kind of make sense for him to be the Ghostface responsible for everything else in the movie. But he's definitely one of the. He's definitely a really good Ghostface, but I do prefer three others. So let's move on to find out who gets the bronze on this list. All right. So number 3 is Quinn Bailey. I just loved her reveal, honestly, because she fakes her death halfway through the movie. Now, a Ghostface faking their own death, that's not new territory. Billy faked his death, and Roman faked his death. But those were close to the end of the movie. This is the first time a Ghostface faked their death halfway through the movie and proceeded to go on. And why did she fake her death? To move more efficiently as Ghostface. But the reason that she ranks so highly is the fact that she is responsible for two of the best sequences in maybe the entire series, with the subway scene and probably my favorite set piece of the entire series, which is Gale versus Ghostface. A very good sequence which you are fearing for Gale's life. That is a very intense scene, and Quinn being the Ghostface responsible for it honestly completely makes sense. Also, she is the first Ghostface to actually kind of acknowledge Stu. They kind of mention him a lot, but it was nice hearing someone actually give Stu some kind of compliment compared to, being second fiddle to Billy. So, yeah, who's the runner up? Well, let's find out. Because number 2 is Jill from Scream 4. Okay, so I'd be willing to say Jill is the most evil Ghostface. Uh, and oh boy, uh, her motive is she's doing this new murder spree to become Sydney. She wants to become the Sydney of her generation. She wants that fame and attention, news media, books, movies. She wants all of it, which is just such an interesting motive. And then she's the Ghostface that actually is the closest to killing Sydney. It honestly seemed like Sydney was going to die for a minute there. And 2, she comes the closest to actually winning, because if she hadn't slipped up with mentioning hers and Gale's matching wounds, Dewey outright said Sydney was probably going to need to be reminded of what happened. Literally, what causes Jill to lose ultimately is her bringing up the matching wounds. But she gets points for being the Ghostface that deceives the audience the most. And in my opinion, she also has one of the most shocking sequences in which she beats herself up. She's ramming herself into paintings, scratching herself, ripping her hair, stabbing herself, flinging herself on a table. I was thinking, good grief, she's crazy. So, yeah, but last time Jill was my number 1. So, who's taking that spot from Jill? Well, if you've paid close attention, this should not be a surprise. And so, my number 1 Ghostface is Stu Macher from Scream 1. come on, it had to be Stu, right? This guy is just hilarious to watch. Yeah, whenever I watch Scream, I'm not waiting for the climax. I'm not waiting to see Skeet Ulrich's character go crazy and his crazy performance. I'm waiting to see Stu's Ghostface. Stu is just incredible. From and throughout the movie, before he's Ghostface, he is just so fun to watch. And then everything that's great about Stu gets dialed up to 50 once he reveals himself to be Ghostface. He is just so fun to watch. And ultimately just has some of my favorite lines in the series, where he says, "My mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me," and peer pressure, I'm far too sensitive. Those lines just make me laugh. But also, apparently it was actually Stu in the beginning of the movie. I heard somewhere that Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson said it's Stu at the beginning of Scream 1, which means he's responsible for the opening sequence. Billy was probably on the phone, but Stu was the one actually doing the legwork. So, ultimately, while he might be viewed as just the other Ghostface, in my opinion, he's the best one. But yeah, that's it for this video. Do you agree with my rankings? And you know what? Feel free to leave your own rankings in the comments, because I get curious about other people's opinions. That's it for this video. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.